Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the discussion panel Open Banking by PSD2, Results and Perspectives. My name is Michał Polasik. I'm a professor at the Nicholas Copernicus University and the director of the Research Center for Digital Economy and Finance. Over 2 years since PSD2 RTS went live in September 2019 and started a new era of open banking. Today we have regulated open banking in European Union, and we will talk about how efficient already was and what the future will bring. The discussion starting point will be a few highlights from our pan-European study PayTech Impact EU, which I will going to present you now. The study is a result of 4 years of work of Polish-Belgian team in cooperation with the European payment industry. The study comprehensively explores the impact of PayTech development and laws, mostly PSD2, and on the introduction of innovations in payment services market, taking into account customer needs and strategy of financial sector. The study is financed by National Science Center in Poland and implemented by the Center for Digital Economy and Finance at the Nicholas Copernicus University. We perform our study only thanks to the support of our partners, which you can see here. And it's worth to mention that European Banking Federations, European Payment Institution Federation, and Delta Legal representatives are with us today for the discussion. And the study covers two services. First, expert study covers a survey with 202 sector experts. It covers 30 countries, that means all European Union countries, UK, Norway, and Switzerland, and all institutions that are stakeholders at the payment services market. Consumer survey covers 5,500 respondents from 22 most populated European Union countries, and they are representative of the whole internet user market in EU. And what is important that the results are already in use for the purpose of the project of evaluation PSD2 regulation under the consent of European Commission DG FISMA under tender for the study of the application of impact of directive on payment services. And it is implemented by consortium of VVA, CEPS, and Nicholas Copernicus University. So let's start from some highlights that will be useful for the discussion. First, let's look at the anticipating long-term impact of PSD2. Most of experts are blue collars. They believe that most of credit institutions will provide at least one TPP service to the market. Also, most of them think that compliance with PSD2 regulation will lead to the substantial increase of the cost of functioning of banking system. More divided are opinion of the scenario if the TPPs, third-party providers, will downgrade the ASPSP role to infrastructure providers, while the front end will be provided by TPPs. And if you look a bit wider to beyond the PSD2 itself, what are the scenarios for the payment market? Well, first, there is a strong consensus. More than 60% experts believe that in that long-term horizon, the development of open banking infrastructure for payments will be the main factor behind the development of payment innovation. So we can say that's a proof of anticipated success of open banking in Europe. The second, what we selected for the discussion is that banks are perceived by most of the experts that will remain dominant in payments, in servicing payment for retail customer. However, a quarter of experts are on the opposite opinion. So it could be also a radical scenario happened due to their opinions. And then more than half of experts believe that specialized hubs will play the role of dominant integration in the API infrastructure network. However, the opinion if the single pan-European API will be developed and then will be said to be obligatory, they are very divided, and I think that's a point for discussion as well. Thank you for your attention, and now we will start the discussion panel. Let's welcome our panelists, outstanding expert on the payment services market in Europe, who agreed to take part in our discussion. So, first I would like to welcome Markus Metschitzer, Policy Officer at DG FISMA European Commission. Good morning, Markus.
Good morning.
Gijs Boudewijn, Vice Chair Payment System Committee for European Banking Federation. Hello, Gijs.
Good morning.
And Krzysztof Korus, Member of Executive Board, European Payment Institution Federation. Good morning.
Good morning, Professor. Good morning, fellows.
Unfortunately, Jozef Klaassen, Chief Revenue Officer at Aiia, a Mastercard company, could not join us today because of health issues. So we wish you a lot of health, Jozef, and we will go forward in this set of discussions. So, and one important information to the audience, as the discussion panel is broadcasted, please feel free to ask us questions on conference chat, and we will do our best to respond online. So let's get to the questions. The first question is for Markus. Some research like Paytech Impact EU that I showed, they showed that the results of PSD2 at the moment are still less than expected by market experts. However, in 5 years perspective, open banking is perceived to be a success and a key factor for innovation. And does FISMA consider the current path of development of open banking to enable achieving goals of retail payment strategy of EU, or eventually are there any plans for of EU Commission to improve the open banking regulation?
Yes, many thanks, Michał, and also especially for this very interesting slides and the results of this research project. But let me start on a positive note. So I think we can be very proud of what we have achieved with PSD2. So there is no doubt that it has increased competition between PSPs, especially the new actors on the market, payment initiation service providers, account information service providers, and it contributed to innovation to a very high degree, I would say. But nevertheless, as we have also pointed out in the retail payment strategy, we think that the directive indeed has not yet revealed its full potential. I mean, this is unfortunately a fact, but this is also exactly the reason why the Commission is currently reviewing the directive, and in order to better understand the need for potential changes, if changes are required at all. So we haven't taken this decision yet. Open banking is only one of the many issues we are looking at, but these are certainly very important provisions. Let me maybe quickly touch upon what we are. So we're currently expecting input from an external study. You also have mentioned this in your introductory remarks. So we have commissioned an external study. They are looking at a number of issues also related to open banking. we also have asked the EBA to provide us with input. And of course, we are also expecting input from various stakeholders. So we are currently preparing our public consultation, and this input and feedback we will receive will be extremely important to really get the complete picture, and then to decide on what we will do. Maybe just a few examples. So we have mandated our contractor and also the EBA to look into obstacles to the payment account access, whether there are issues in terms of interoperability, further standardization of APIs. Of course, you have mentioned it. Is there a need of a pan-European mandatory interface? Also, relationship with data protection is extremely important, and we need to look into this as well. And also on the scope, whether it makes sense, for example, to grant access not only to payment account data, but also to, I don't know, savings accounts, consumer credit data, and so on. So there's a lot on the plate. We should also not forget that there is currently an amendment being discussed and brought forward by the EBA on the 90 days re-authentication and exemption to the strong customer authentication provisions. It's a typical example of an obstacle to account access, and it has a negative impact on the customer experience, and it's one of the reasons why the Commission very much supports this amendment. So this is some food for thought. Maybe just one last element I want to bring into the discussion, because I think it's important when talking about possible legislative changes in order to make improvements. I think in the PSD2 review, it's very important to make a distinction between the directive on the one hand, but we should not forget there is also the RTS, where basically the majority of rules are stipulated, but the procedure for changing those provisions is different, and we need to, I think, keep this in mind when we talk about the PSD2 review.
Thank you, Markus. I agree that the response from the stakeholders is crucial to gather all the voices and analyze it. So thank you. The next question for Gijs. Please, how do you assess benefits of providing services as TPP by banks in Europe in the context as of effort of providing open bank infrastructure, open APIs, and does it differ country to country? Because you have quite a good view from the European Banking Federation on that.
Yes, well, there's a lot of questions inside that question. First and foremost, I'd like to say that the first instance of manifestation of PSD2 was the proposal of the Commission in, if I recall correctly, July 2013, which is now 9 years ago. So we've been at it for a long time, and even before it was implemented, I believe I will say it was a huge wake-up call for the incumbent banks that they really needed to get their act together under the threat of new competition and the strife, of course, for competition, innovation, and so on and so forth. So what I really see is that the most important effect intended probably is that it was indeed a giant wake-up call for the existing banking industry. And well, Krzysztof also knows that we've made quite a journey from the start to where we are now, a journey from fighting each other to understanding that we need to cooperate to reap the full benefits of PSD2, and that we can do it together. And if we work together and cooperate, we will maximize the benefits not only for the industry, the TPPs, and the banks, which means also banks acting as TPPs. Ultimately, of course, for the benefit of the European citizen. So we've come a long way, and we've learned a lot of lessons. And indeed, also working together in the Euro Retail Payment Board on standardization, we've come to the realization that we need to cooperate not only between banks, but also the banks and the TPPs. The Commission has been very helpful there, of course, also the European Central Bank. And I think that only now we are realizing how we should have done it in the first place. But that's the way things work. You need to learn along the way. So I'm pretty hopeful for the future. The role of the incumbent banks, the ASPSPs, also acting as TPPs, I'm not so sure. I theoretically, yes, the bank can play that role too, the TPP role, but typically you see that you need more fintech-like culture, very innovative, agile companies to develop these new services, with, of course, the limitation that they need to get a license too. And there's a lot of fintechs that, of course, have great ideas and are very innovative, but are perhaps somewhat scared sometimes because the heavy procedures they need to go through to obtain a license as a licensed payment institution to provide those services. So we might need to look there too. I strongly believe in the cooperation between the incumbents and the fintechs, and of course the banks can do it themselves. But I personally don't see that being the dominant scenario. It's the incumbents that take care of the money, that provide the basic infrastructure, cooperating with the TPPs to provide better service to the customers for the benefit of all. And I think we've also come to realize that to make it all work, there needs to be something in it for everyone, which means a good business model, and that's what we're working on right now. Forcing one side of the market to provide stuff for free, we now know doesn't necessarily provide the best results. But if you say, well, if you create value, you also need to sort of divide and share that value, which in cooperation, and that will produce the best results. And well, that's what my first remarks would be. I'm very optimistic. We came from payments, just payments, realizing that it wouldn't stop there. As Markus also said, we need to go beyond payments to open finance, other types of financial services. That's also what we've constructed in the ERPB group, and what we are trying to do now to create a framework that can be reused beyond payments for open finance, but also hopefully beyond finance. But that's a colleague, DG in the Director General within the Commission, DG Connect, that's taking care of that one. But we're trying to create the future here, really.
Thank you, Gijs. You're very open information on the journey. I think that the journey is achievement of the financial sector in Europe itself, and we can learn a lot from that. The next question for Krzysztof. When you look at the current market situation, how do you find the level of implementation of PSD2 regulated open banking from the perspective of PSPs? And what are key barriers to developing open banking at the moment?
Thank you very much for this question, for inviting me to the panel. So the very high level summary is, the good news is that the APIs are in place, which has not been that obvious a few years ago, but yes, indeed they are in place. Not so often is that the first API for a bank, although it's also an important part of the market. So the banks, the ASPSP in principle, have learned to have APIs, and APIs which are partially outside their control. The bad thing is that the quality of this API market is very unlinear. So they are divergent. It varies, and this is the main barrier that you have asked about in the next part of your question. And what are the barriers that we are mostly confronted with? So the fragmentation has many phases. So first phase of fragmentation is the implementation of API one by one. So it's this absent pan-EU API, which Markus very legitimately referred to. And I am having now a very fresh picture and the feeling of this big question. I'm since a few months now, I am really deeply involved in open banking projects far outside of Europe. So there are folks trying to do the open banking. It's interesting to note that very often those guys, they know little about open banking. They know little about European Union, but they know two acronyms, PSD2 and GDPR. This is really what they know. And they want to have open banking. This is relevant. They consider open banking relevant. And in the introductory discussions we had, where we have outlined and we have discussed the building stones of the open banking, they were mostly surprised how come that such a big, challenging, ambitious project ended up with each ASPSP having their own APIs and no central access point to the whole concept. So I must admit, I didn't think of it enough when I participated in the first impact study on the open banking. So again, this seems to be the biggest challenge, long-term or at least medium challenge in all that we do around open banking. So uncertainty about the access and result, that would be the second biggest barrier. So if there is a TPP just trying to do the business life in open banking, no certainty. How good the API is, and what are the results? So what are the information available? What's the process? How bad or good it is? And this is really then amplified by very basic issues with communication with ASPSP. So we are advising, we are supporting many TPPs, and it's not unusual to see a ticket registered in a ASPSP CSM site, and you get the email confirmation. Thank you for asking the question, or thank you for notifying the problems. We will revert back to you not later than in 2 weeks' time. So we are talking now of implementing an API. There are IT specialists sitting in front of the PC, and they get the answer. We will answer in no more than 2 weeks' time. So that is unfortunate. So this poor communication really is source of many problems. Then we have from time to time obstacles. So there are technical and economic obstacles. So if you learn as a TPP that there cannot be more than like 100 or 1,000 connections per minute, and you know nothing how many other TPPs try to connect, then this is completely unpredictable too. The overall result is that, I hope I'm not mistaken if I say that there is no sustainable, so far, based on this, no sustainable open banking business model independent from any other service. So, so far, open banking can't survive just by open banking. They need to be accompanied by something else, except for hubs. And this is what I will come back again in a minute. So this is the only business model that has this sustainability available. But if I'm referring to fragmentation as the basic and most important barrier, so let's not forget it. We shouldn't forget that fragmentation isn't the fault of open banking or ASPSPs and TPPs. We have embedded fragmentation, and we still have embedded fragmentation in the EU market. So actually, what I am now looking at open banking is as an opportunity to further standardize European pay tech space. In the SEPA payment account access, where we work, including EBF and Gijs, almost weekly on the setting up of pan-European API access scheme, we have never-ending discussions whether in payment initiation services we need only payment guarantee or funds blocking, so blocking of funds. And we have endless discussions because some countries are used to blocking funds and some countries are used just to provide the payment guarantee. We are trying to sort this out. So there's lots of standardization needed in the European payment space, but not just because we have open banking, but in principle. It's also interesting to see when compared with the non-European projects that AIS is much more universal. I mean, the account information services, which are pure data services, they are universal. They are understandable for many, many players. So you don't need to translate it. But with payment initiation service, it's very specific for the EU. In many markets outside Europe, credit transfer is very limited. You can't pay for kids' school with credit transfer, you pay with debit card. So to sum up, what we need to push, we need hubs. I'm not now referring to what we need from the EU, from the legislator. I'm now referring to medium and long-term perspective. Definitely, we need hubs. We need central point of access, but it has to be a very well-informed, very wise decision, because hubs at the same time as they bring profits, they bring threats, because if there are hubs in place, ASPSP may become invisible because it really facilitates access. You don't care who is behind the hub, you just care how good the hub is. So open banking is promising, definitely, but we need still a lot of effort to make it fully working.
Thank you, Krzysztof. It's really very important voice to be taken into account in PSD2 evaluation project, and a very concrete list of ideas that we have to consider. And I think that it's also the move to my next question. I want to come back to Gijs and ask you in that context, as you mentioned that PSD2 was adopted a long time ago in 2015, and then the regulation, does the regulation still meet current needs of banking sector? What really banks needs from your perspective to benefit more from the open data economy? What do we need as banks?
Well, that's a very good question, of course. Thank you, but I don't have a crystal ball. But picking up on what Krzysztof said, I think it's not so much about what banks need. It is what we all need, what the ecosystem need, and how you put that together to produce the best results for the European citizen at large, because that's what we're doing. We're not just doing it in an abstract way to promote competition and innovation. Is shouldn't be a goal in itself. It should be a means to an end, i.e. better, more competitive services to the benefit of the end user. That's why we're all doing this, right? I totally agree with Krzysztof that it sounded like a magic word that would solve world hunger, open banking, but of course it doesn't. It's not a business model in itself. It can facilitate underlying business models, and I think we've sort of forgotten a little bit. And it's not to defend the traditional banks too much, but it was a little bit against the banks. They were not innovative. They didn't compete. So we need to go one step beyond and break open the payment account, and then the whole world will change. But of course, it didn't. The world is more complex than that, and I believe that only now we've come to joint realizations, also in the SPAA scheme we're working on, as Krzysztof referred to. We need to sit together and together find out how we can make it best work, what the TPP side needs to do, what the banks need to do, and standardization is absolutely one of the issues there. But how can you enforce that or mandate that from a European perspective if you also have the fundamental principle that the regulation should be technology neutral? That's the difficult thing. I recall discussions that was in 2017, 2000, I think, with Imran Galawassam, who sang at the time the CEO of the open banking implementation entity, where they came to us in Europe, said, well, you can have all our stuff because the way your guys are going, every bank doing it by himself with a few standardization initiatives, it's not going to work. You should do it like we do. We mandate it. And of course, they had the mandate from the Competition and Markets Authority, which we didn't have in Europe, to mandate a certain way to do it. But we said, well, we can't change horses because we are already underway. It's a good idea, but that's not how we started out, and we can't change horses now. And we made it sort of for the best with a few standardization initiatives like STET in France, the Berlin Group in Germany, the Polish standardization initiative. So at least that was better than having thousands of different APIs. We at least had some families of APIs that sort of looked the same, but still don't meet, for reasons that Krzysztof explained, still differ in practice. And that is, of course, because we don't have a fully harmonized payment account infrastructure. I mean, at the functional level, we have SEPA and we all work by the rule books of the EPC, but that doesn't mean all these processing systems behind are identical, etc. We don't have one way of operating with all the cultural differences, as Krzysztof also explained. So we really need to go back to the drawing board. What do we want to achieve? What are the lessons learned, and how can we make it work? But it does mean to me, and that's also what Krzysztof said, you need a viable business model. Otherwise, it will not work. You can say we want it, yes, but it has to be sustainable. And I think that is very much the one of the most important things. I believe we agreed together with TPPs and the ASPSPs, and that's why we're working on right now, that we need a mutual beneficial business model. Otherwise, it will not work, and the end user will not reap the benefits.
Thank you, Gijs. We learned a lot about the banks and about the current state of the open infrastructure. But let's have a look at the TPP side. And I would like to ask Krzysztof, are TPPs ready to go beyond open banking to other open data sectors? And will it be still place for PSPs, or should we expect some new type of market players?
Indeed, the word open makes immediately think us that, if TPPs, if ASPSP do open banking, then they will do open finance. So far, what I have learned from participating in many work groups, including those under the umbrella of the European Commission, which we are constantly grateful for, because this indeed is a great push, a great intellectual push towards finding very balanced solutions. So based on those experience, I'm hesitant to see the current open banking champions to be open finance champions. So why? What I have learned is that open finance is 10 or 100 times bigger than open banking. So if we include all the particularities of the financial services and markets, and at the same time, there are so many business models in wider finance. So if you look on the remaining part of the finance, the paytech seems super harmonized, that this is one and the same business model across all the markets and so on. So this is why I was much more optimistic before taking part in those discussions. So now I think that it is much bigger challenge. And the last reason why I'm hesitant about nominating open banking force to continue with open finance is because this is obviously only my observation, but my feeling is that paytech folks have little idea about finance beyond payments. This is how it just went. So the payments take so much time to provide good payments, not non-stop payments, that really have limited time to extend to other parts of the financial sector. So this is the first reason why I believe that not necessarily the open banking is the natural driver of open finance. Then the second reason and rationale is the dilemmas that we face in that part of open. So we need much more to think of self-limitation when doing open finance. What I mean is that technology allows and opens for us almost everything. We can process all most sensitive data in seconds with zero cost, but we have already decided that we don't do this. So that based on GDPR, we don't do deep profiling, we do not process sensitive data, although we can, technically we can. We need incredible amount of that discussion in open finance. Just to give an example, again, in one of the meetings, what was the use case presented by the stakeholders? So the insurance should have access to the server of a car manufacturer to be able to check whether just before the car accident, when I changed the lane to the left lane, the blind spot indicator was on. Because if it was on, I shouldn't be paid the insurance. So for me, it's a clear way to financial exclusion. So we are often referring to financial inclusion in paytech, but we are included more or less. We are included, but where the real threat of financial exclusion is in open finance if we go too far. So and the third reason why I believe that the open banking is not the right place to provide the content is because open finance differs very much from the open banking also in that space that there was no predecessor like we had in open banking. The online payment services were exposed, screen scrapping was possible. So we have learned a lot just on screen scrapping. And this was actually the background that gave us the courage to do legislation on PSD on open banking. So we don't have similar lab in open finance. We need to really discuss this in vacuum. So this is why, again, I believe open banking is not the right way to start from. And finally, the role of the TPP. So what would be the role of the TPPs in my expectations? So they will definitely have competitive advantage. They have absorbed all the pain, they have the lessons learned, they have the experience of reading the APIs, implementing them, and so on. So they will have the advantage. They will not be the leaders. Who out of those who could stay and be relevant? Again, hubs. Hubs, they concentrate the experience, the competence in reading APIs, in connecting APIs. So again, hubs, yes. TPPs, not necessarily as the leaders for open finance.
Thank you, Krzysztof. And the last question is for Markus. When can we expect PSD2 or other new regulations regarding open banking? And what are key lessons learned from open banking for opening other sectors?
Well, with regard to PSD3, as I said, we are still in the preparatory phase. So it's now important to wait for input. I've already elaborated on that. But the next step will be the publication of the report. So based on the review clause, the Commission is obliged to come up with a report, which is to be expected, I would say, in autumn this year. However, this does not necessarily imply that at that time we will already come up with legislative amendments. So first we need to decide whether we will do so. And if we decide to also come up with proposals, of course, we need to have impact assessment, which takes some time. Which means that we will then already be in the first half of 2023. So this is our time horizon. And again, what is now important is to get input, from you. This is now our focus. I have mentioned the 90-day re-authentication change. It's also something we will end up on our table because the Commission will need to endorse that. So we would expect this. We will expect to receive the draft RTS on the amendment. Maybe in April, and then let's see how long it will take for us to be able to publish this in the official journal. So the second question, and I think it's the last one. It's very tricky because it touches upon open finance. So I understand you want to me to give some lessons to be learned from PSD2. You know that the open finance initiative runs in parallel to the PSD2 review. It's Jan Zeisens who is dealing with this very challenging task, and they look very careful to us what we are doing here with PSD2. So they are very much interested on, and they follow very closely the developments on PSD2 to learn from us. But which advice can I give to my colleagues? Well, I would say be prepared for very difficult negotiations. I mean, we have seen this in PSD2, unfortunately. So we have very at that time, very diverging industry positions. It was not easy to get an agreement, and I would expect this not being easier, or maybe I'm completely wrong, but let's see. I think we also need to look, or we need to see the overall picture. So I mean, we cannot grant unlimited access. So we are in a bigger legislative framework, and I'd like to mention data protection rules, for example, which need to be respected. Of course, it took us on PSD2 also a lot of time to get this right. What I remember. And of course, the principle of same rights, same rules. So new market players were only able to grant access because in tandem they have been supervised. So we also, I think, need to consider that access can only go hand in hand with strong supervision of these players. But I mean, I would stop here. And again, I think it's important to focus on PSD2, and again, it's these are two different work streams, and I would like to emphasize this because we have already received a lot of questions. Okay, what does it mean? Does it mean that you will shift all the access to payment account data provisions to the Open Finance Initiative and so on. No, that's for the time being, this is not what we intend. So we need to focus on getting our framework right.
Thank you, Markus. And as our panel is coming to the end, I would like to thank our expert for discussion. It gives us fascinating insight in the future of open banking, open finance. And as the Economic Forum Time has goal to bring comments, recommendation to the policy, to the regulation, to the marketplace, I think that we did our job good today. Thank you for attention. Ask us questions during the broadcasting, and let's keep on working on open banking and open data economy in the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.